In the early 1980s, a young French archaeologist named Stephen Rostain told his professors at the Sorbonne that he wanted to study the Amazon. They told him he was throwing his career away. Nobody important ever lived in the rainforest, they said. No cities, no civilization, just scattered tribes and empty jungle. His professors gave him a choice for his specialization: Mayan, Mayan, or Mayan. Rostain ignored all of them. He spent the next 30 years digging in places nobody cared about. And in January 2024, the journal Science published what his lasers found hidden beneath the canopy of Ecuador. Over 6,000 ancient platforms, 15 connected cities, roads stretching 25 kilometers in perfectly straight lines. The oldest complex urban network ever found in the Amazon. Rostain had been right the entire time. But here is the part that almost nobody knows. Ecuador is not hiding just one lost civilization. It is hiding at least two, and scientists have only scanned 2% of the terrain. To understand how deep this rabbit hole goes, we need to start not in the Amazon, but in a cloud forest on the other side of the Andes. Because in January 2026, a completely different team of scientists pointed their lasers at a completely different jungle. And what they found changes the picture entirely. The Andean Chocó is one of the most biodiverse regions on the entire planet. It sits on the western slopes of the Andes in northwestern Ecuador, a dense subtropical cloud forest draped in permanent mist where the mountains fall away toward the Pacific coast. For decades, archaeologists working on the ground in this region had identified scattered ruins among the vegetation, about 40 earthen mounds, a handful of stone terraces. Interesting enough to note in a field report, but nothing that would make international headlines, nothing that would challenge any assumptions. Then in December 2025, the Instituto Metropolitano de Patrimonio, Quito's Municipal Cultural Heritage Authority, decided to fly a LiDAR survey over a single commune called San Francisco de Pachijal in the parish of Pacto. LiDAR works by firing millions of laser pulses from the air through the tree canopy and measuring how long they take to bounce back, creating detailed topographic maps of the ground surface beneath. It sees what human eyes cannot. It strips away centuries of overgrowth in a matter of hours. The results came back in January 2026, and they were staggering. Those 40 mounds the ground teams had found over years of fieldwork, the LiDAR revealed over 200. Those 10 terraces, over 100. Across just 600 hectares of dense cloud forest, the lasers uncovered an entire hidden landscape of circular and rectangular constructions connected by ancient roads, with carefully planned settlement patterns linked to productive, social, and ceremonial activities. Juan Gijon, the consultant archaeologist for the Heritage Institute, called it clear evidence of deliberate human modification of the environment. One structure stood out in particular. Near the San Francisco River, the LiDAR revealed a sunken rectangular building with stone walls, an apparent entrance, and a water drainage channel. Evidence of advanced hydraulic knowledge in a culture that most archaeology textbooks do not even mention. Now here is the number that should keep every archaeologist in South America awake at night. 600 hectares is approximately 2% of the Andean Chocó. The broader region covers over 280,000 hectares of cloud forest. If the structural density holds across even a fraction of that area, tens of thousands of pre-Hispanic features may still be sitting under the trees, completely undiscovered, completely unmapped, and completely unprotected. We need to be transparent about something important here. As of March 2026, these Andean Chocó findings have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed journal. The fieldwork is complete, but the laboratory analyses are still underway. The technical report has not been released. What we are looking at right now is preliminary data from a municipal heritage survey, reported through official government channels and archaeology news outlets. The structures are physically there. The LiDAR images are real. The scientific validation process is ongoing. That said, the question is not whether they exist. The question is how many more are waiting in the other 98%. The structures belong to a civilization called the Yumbo. Until very recently, almost nobody outside Ecuador had heard of them. The Yumbo occupied the western slopes of the Pichincha volcano from approximately 800 BC to 1660 AD. That is a span of roughly 2,400 years. For perspective, the entire Roman Empire, from its legendary founding to the fall of Constantinople, lasted about 2,000 years. The Yumbo outlasted it. And here is what makes them genuinely unusual in the context of pre-Hispanic South America. The Yumbo were not conquerors. They were not warriors. They were traders. While other civilizations expanded through military force and territorial domination, the Yumbo built a commercial network connecting the Andean highlands to the Pacific coast through the cloud forest. Their trade routes ran westward, not eastward toward the Amazon. They moved salt, cotton, tropical fruits, coca, and other lowland products up to the highland markets, while bringing manufactured goods and highland resources back down to the coastal communities. They were the middlemen of the pre-Hispanic Andes, controlling the most valuable commodity of all, the route itself. To make this commerce possible across some of the most difficult terrain in South America, they engineered something remarkable. They carved paths, called Culuncos, deep into the mountainsides, cutting channels that ran for kilometers through the steep jungle terrain. Some of these paths were cut so deep that they formed canyon-like corridors below the forest floor. Over time, vegetation grew over the tops of these cuts, creating natural shaded tunnels through the canopy. Air-conditioned corridors for traders carrying heavy loads between the freezing highlands and the humid coast. On a landscape where temperatures and humidity could change drastically over a few hundred meters of elevation, these tunnels regulated the environment for the people walking through them. Alongside these roads, they constructed tolas, truncated pyramids standing up to 20 meters tall, used as elite residences, flood protection platforms, lookout points, and geometric markers visible across the forested landscape. The architectural elements found in the new Andean Chocó survey closely resemble those at the already known Tulipe archaeological complex further south, suggesting the Yumbo engineering style was consistent across a much larger territory than previously recognized. But the most extraordinary site the Yumbo left behind sits at the equator itself, in a cloud forest clearing near the modern town of Gualea. It is called Tulipe, and what archaeologists found there raises questions that still have not been fully answered. Tulipe contains 6 ceremonial stone pools arranged in a complex that immediately suggests intentional design. 2 rectangular pools, 2 semicircular, 1 polygonal, 1 square. Water flowed into these pools from a natural spring through carefully constructed aqueducts. The precision of the stonework and the geometric variety of the basins point to something far beyond simple water storage. Archaeologist Holger Jara proposed a theory that has fascinated researchers for decades. He believes Tulipe was a planetarium, a ceremonial observatory where the Yumbo studied the night sky by watching constellations reflected in the still water of these stone basins. Sitting directly on the equator, the site would have provided exceptional views of both the northern and southern celestial hemispheres. Now, this is a hypothesis, not a proven function. Some researchers believe the stone pools may actually be Inca constructions, built on top of an older Yumbo ceremonial site, since Inca ruins sit directly above the complex. The Inca clearly recognized this location as significant. But what virtually all archaeologists agree on is that the Yumbo possessed remarkable astronomical knowledge for a civilization that most of the world has never heard of. Ronald Lippe, a researcher from the University of Wisconsin who has spent over 40 years studying the Yumbo, delivered a lecture at Yale University in February 2024 detailing the sophistication of this culture. 4 decades of fieldwork on a civilization that barely exists in the historical record. So what happened to the Yumbo? 2 catastrophes arrived almost simultaneously and left nothing standing. First, European diseases swept through the population after the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, decimating communities that had no immunity to Old World pathogens. Then in 1680, the Pichincha volcano erupted, burying their remaining lands under volcanic ash. The combination was total. The Spanish forgot the Yumbo had ever existed. Vegetation swallowed every trace of their tunneled roads, their stone pools, their pyramid-shaped platforms. When ruins finally resurfaced in 1874, they were incorrectly attributed to the Inca. Systematic excavations did not begin until the late 1970s. A civilization that lasted 2,400 years, erased from memory in a single generation. And only now, with laser technology fired from aircraft, are we beginning to understand how much of their world is still hidden in the cloud forest. Angel Miranda, a local landowner in Pachijal whose family has known about the remains for generations, said it plainly when the January 2026 LiDAR results were announced. "It is our history," he said, "that of the Yumbos and that of Quito. Now, here is where this story takes a turn that nobody expected. Because while the Yumbo were building their trade tunnels through the cloud forest on the western slopes of the Andes, something was happening on the eastern side of those same mountains. Something much larger. Something that would take a stubborn Frenchman 30 years and a 6-year bureaucratic delay to prove to the world. We need to go back to Stephen Rostain. Born in 1962 in Brest, Brittany, France. He was the first French archaeologist to dedicate his entire career to Amazonian archaeology, a real pioneer. He has since published more than 450 works, including roughly 45 books. In the early 1980s, he was just a student, fascinated by Latin American civilizations, whose department had no interest in anything outside the Maya world. Rostain spent his master's fieldwork in Mexico and Guatemala in 1982, but he found himself repelled by what he encountered: the hierarchical society, the sacrifices, and the focus on warfare. He wanted to understand something different. So he chose French Guiana for his doctoral research, the Amazon. The pushback from the academic establishment was immediate. He was told that no one was interested in the archaeology of the Amazon and that he would never get a job. Rostain's response, which he has repeated in interviews for decades, was characteristically blunt. He said, "Thankfully, I am from Brittany. We are very stubborn people." He flew ultralight aircraft over the jungle canopy of French Guiana and spotted strange mound patterns in the landscape below. When he proposed that these mounds were constructed by indigenous people before European contact, the reaction was dismissal. "It is useless," they told him. "You will not see anything." The idea that indigenous Amazonians had built anything of significance before the arrival of Europeans was simply not accepted by mainstream archaeology at the time. The reason it was not accepted has a name: Betty J. Meggers. She was a Smithsonian Institution archaeologist who published a profoundly influential book in 1971 called Amazonia: Man and Culture in a Counterfeit Paradise. Meggers argued that the Amazon's soil was too poor and too nutrient depleted to support complex societies. Dense populations could not have formed. Cities could not have been built. Sophisticated civilizations could not have existed. Her theory became the dominant paradigm for decades. It was rooted in Julian Stewart's 1948 Handbook of South American Indians, which ranked indigenous peoples in an explicit hierarchy, with Amazonian groups at the very bottom. Rostain described the reality this paradigm created. Up to the year 2000, the average scholarly handbook on French Guiana claimed history started in 1604 with the arrival of the French. Before that, there was only the savage who did not want to be civilized. That was the official academic position, not in the 1800s, in the year 2000. Think about what that means. An entire continent's indigenous history, dismissed by Western academia as irrelevant. Thousands of years of human achievement, reduced to a footnote about people who supposedly lived in huts and never built anything worth studying. That was the world Rostain was fighting against. And for decades he was fighting it essentially alone. Meggers' theory had a problem that the establishment did not want to confront. It was built on a fundamental misunderstanding of Amazonian soil. The assumption was that tropical soils are universally infertile, too depleted by heavy rainfall to support agriculture at any meaningful scale. What Meggers did not account for, and what researchers later confirmed across dozens of sites, is that ancient Amazonians engineered their own soil. They created Terra Preta, dark earth enriched with charcoal, organic waste, and pottery fragments. Self-renewing, incredibly fertile, and still productive thousands of years after the civilizations that created it had vanished. The very foundation of Meggers' dismissal was built on soil science that turned out to be wrong. Rostain kept digging while the rest of the field looked the other way. He moved to Ecuador in 1996 and began working in the Upano Valley, a lush river corridor in the eastern Andean foothills, shadowed by the continuously active Sangay volcano. The valley floor was thick with vegetation, but even from the ground, Rostain could see things that did not belong in a landscape that was supposed to be empty. Mounds rising above the tree line, rectangular platforms arranged in clusters. What appeared to be organized settlements spread across the valley in patterns that looked deliberate, not natural. The discovery felt hidden, and it did not fit the expected story. He spent 7 years conducting fieldwork, walking the terrain season after season, excavating by hand, mapping what he could see with his own eyes. 7 years of muddy boots and slow progress in a valley that mainstream archaeology had written off. The jungle hides its secrets beneath layers of vegetation and centuries of soil accumulation. The canopy is too thick, the undergrowth too dense. Ground surveys could only reveal fragments of a picture whose true scale remained invisible from the forest floor. Then in 2015, Ecuador's National Heritage Institute commissioned a private firm called Techno Project, a Russian company led by surveyors Svoisky and Romanenko, to fly an airborne LiDAR survey over the region. They strapped a LiDAR device to the belly of a fixed-wing aircraft, piloted by a former colonel of the Russian army, and scanned approximately 600 square kilometers of jungle. The resolution was extraordinary. The sensors could detect features as small as 20 centimeters high. Anything taller than a shoe, rising above the forest floor, would show up on the digital terrain model. The data came back, and then nothing happened. For 6 years, the LiDAR data was not released to Rostain's research team until 2021. 6 years, the most detailed archaeological scan of the Ecuadorian Amazon sitting in a government database, while the scientists who needed it could not access a single data point. This was not deliberate suppression. This was institutional inertia, the kind of quiet, grinding neglect that has characterized how South American governments treat Amazonian heritage for generations. If you are finding this journey through Ecuador's hidden civilizations as fascinating as we do, take a moment to like and subscribe. We cover archaeological mysteries and lost civilizations every week, and we are about to show you what those lasers found beneath the canopy after 3 decades of waiting. When Rostain and his colleague Antoine Dorisson at CNRS in Paris finally received the LiDAR data in 2021, they began processing the digital terrain models on their computer screens. Layer by layer, the jungle canopy was stripped away, and what emerged on their monitors was beyond anything they had anticipated. Rostain had spent 7 years on the ground in this valley. He thought he knew the site. He thought he understood its boundaries and its scale. He was profoundly wrong. He told Mangabe in October 2025, "I had worked 7 years in the field in the Upano Valley. To realize the site was so much bigger than I initially thought came as a total surprise. Each day, it was Christmas, with a new gift." The LiDAR revealed over 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms, each approximately 20 meters by 10 meters, standing 2 to 3 meters high, spread across 300 square kilometers of the Upano Valley. At least 15 distinct settlements, 5 large and 10 smaller, connected by wide, dead-straight roads up to 10 meters wide, 5 meters deep, and stretching over 25 kilometers through the jungle. Hundreds of hectares of carefully engineered farmland with drainage ditches and canals. An entire urban landscape hidden under the canopy for at least 14 centuries, dating from approximately 500 BC to 300 to 600 AD. This was not a lost city. Rostain was careful about that distinction. This was something more remarkable. An entire engineered landscape spread across an area 15 times the size of Manhattan. Researchers deliberately avoid calling it a city in the traditional sense. The term they use is garden urbanism, a polycentric network of agrarian settlements integrated with agricultural landscapes and connected by engineered roads, people living with the forest, not against it. And the dating is what sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The Upano network is at least 1,000 years older than any other known complex society in the Amazon. At its peak, Antoine Dorisson estimated a population of 10 to 30,000 inhabitants. For context, that is directly comparable to Cahokia, the largest pre-columbian city in North America, which did not reach its peak until 1,500 years later. Dorisson himself compared it to Roman-era London, which housed between 15 and 30,000 people during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. The physical scale is equally staggering. The core area of the largest settlement complex rivals the footprint of the Giza Pyramid complex. The science paper published in January 2024 shows both sites at the same cartographic scale for direct comparison. Jose Iriarte of the University of Exeter called the findings completely unprecedented in Amazonia and in Andean prehistory. Thomas Garrison of the University of Texas at Austin provided an important caution, noting that it was too soon to compare the site with the classic Maya or Teotihuacan, which were much more complex and more extensive. Fair enough. But nobody is arguing that this network should not exist. And that is exactly the point. Rostain put it in terms anyone can understand. He said it was a lost valley of cities. It is incredible. But before Rostain's discovery could be celebrated without complication, the question of credit forced its way into the story. Pedro Porras was born in 1915 in Ambato, Ecuador. He was a Catholic priest with no formal archaeological training, who became what many Ecuadorians call the father of their country's archaeology. In February 1978, guided by a Salesian missionary named Juan Butasso, Porras reached the Huapula ceremonial site deep in the Upano Valley. The journey itself was an ordeal. Historian Rita del Consuelo de Balcazar described how he had to cross rivers and swamps and clear a path through the jungle by machete. The transport of recovered materials was done by mule. Porras conducted 14 excavations over 6 years, logging 210 days and 29,400 hours of fieldwork in conditions that would test any archaeologist. let alone a self-taught priest in his 60s. He published his findings in 1987, a priest with a machete, working in a valley that the academic establishment said contained nothing worth studying, decades before LiDAR made the invisible visible. When Rostain's science paper made international headlines in January 2024, the reaction inside Ecuador was, as one reporter described it, explosive. Fernanda Ugalde, an Ecuadorian archaeologist now at the Rietberg Museum in Zurich, pointed out that thanks to Porras, the Upano Valley culture had been known for almost 50 years. Alejandra Sanchez Polo and Rita Alvarez Litben had actually published LiDAR findings from the same dataset first, in 2023, in Ecuador's national heritage journal, Strata. Their analysis identified over 7,500 structures, more than Rostain's count of 6,000. Sanchez Polo said it directly. We had the opportunity to publish it, but since we were not publishing in science, it did not create the same stir. Anna Roosevelt of the University of Illinois Chicago was blunter. The recent hype is annoying, she said, as it is not a new discovery and ignores older research from Latin American archaeologists. Rostain's own assessment of Porras shifted between interviews. In 2024, he described Porras as having made a crude excavation. By 2025, his tone had changed considerably. It was Porras who first put the valley on the map, he acknowledged to Mongabe. E-letters on the science website even challenged the paper's stratigraphy and radiocarbon methodology. Rostain's response was sharp. Why complain about the success of the paper rather than enjoying the publication of an unjustly forgotten national heritage, he wrote. Why organize an underground attack? This is a complicated story with no clean hero. Porras found the sites first, but lacked the tools to see the full picture. Ecuadorian researchers published the LiDAR data first, but in a national journal that the international community overlooked. Rostain published in Science and got the global headlines. The credit belongs to all of them, and the fact that it took this long for any of them to be heard says more about the system than about the scientists. So two civilizations, the Yumbo on the western slopes, the Upano network on the eastern foothills, separated by the full width of the Andes, roughly 250 to 300 kilometers, and two mountain ranges apart. No academic paper has ever established a direct connection between them. Their trade routes ran in opposite directions. The Yumbo moved goods westward to the coast. The Upano people exported ceramics westward toward the highlands near modern Cuenca, but along completely different pathways through different mountain passes. And yet the architectural parallels are striking. Both cultures independently chose to build earthen mounds and platforms. Both connected their settlements with engineered road networks. Both modified their landscapes at massive scale. This was almost certainly convergent development, not cultural exchange. Two extraordinary civilizations, separated by the Andes, each independently engineered their landscapes with mounds and fjords. Both are now being revealed for the first time by the technology. Both civilizations vanished, and both are being destroyed right now. The Yumbo were wiped out by European disease and the 1660 Pichincha volcanic eruption. The Upano network collapsed sometime around 300 to 600 AD for reasons that remain genuinely unclear. The Sangay volcano is continuously active, looming over the valley like a permanent threat, but the dating does not match a single catastrophic eruption. It may have been a series of smaller eruptions that degraded farmland over decades. It may have been a prolonged climate crisis that destabilized the food systems these tens of thousands of people depended on. Or it may have been something even harder to pin down, the kind of slow societal unraveling that leaves no clear fingerprint in the archaeological record. Rostain offered a sobering observation. Urbanized hierarchical societies are inherently less resilient to climatic events than dispersed communities, he noted. A small tribe can relocate. A network of 15 connected settlements with engineered roads and organized agriculture cannot simply pack up and move. The civilization may have collapsed under pressures that simpler societies would have absorbed, and its people may have reverted to a tribal, forest-based way of life. The very lifestyle that Meggers later assumed was the only one that had ever existed. The timeline after the collapse tells its own story. After the Upano culture disappeared, nobody lived in the valley for 2 to 3 centuries. The jungle reclaimed everything. Then around 800 AD, a completely different culture called the Huapula moved into the same area and occupied it until roughly 1200 AD. They were not descendants of the original builders. They were a new group, settling on platforms they did not construct, in a landscape they did not engineer. Then the Huapula, too, vanished. The valley sat empty for another 5 centuries, until the Shuar people arrived in the 18th century. But the real tragedy is not that these civilizations fell. Civilizations fall. That is what they do. The real tragedy is what is happening to their remains today. In the Upano Valley, earthen mounds have been destroyed by road construction crews who mistakenly believed they were natural formations that could simply be bulldozed through. Cattle farmers have set up new settlements directly on top of ancient platforms, leveling them for pasture. The Upano River itself has become a victim of voracious mining, both legal and wildcat, churning up the riverbed and destabilizing the surrounding terrain. Archaeologist Sanchez Polo described how fragile these structures are. The mounds are destroyed very easily by rain, wind, and plows, she said. Rostain did not mince words about where the blame lies. The government does not care about Amazonian heritage, he told the art newspaper. It is just a place for resource extraction. And this pattern of neglect, this colonial racist mentality as Rostain himself described it, is the same force that delayed these discoveries for half a century. Andean countries, including Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, are fascinated by their mountains and coast, but not the Amazon, he explained. This is due to a colonial, racist mentality that natives of the Amazon are savages incapable of building anything sophisticated. Antoine Dorisson, the researcher who processed the Upano LiDAR data, captured the scale of the misconception perfectly. Most people picture small groups, probably naked, living in huts, he said. This shows ancient people lived in complicated urban societies. Fernando Mejia, Rostain's co-author on the science paper and an archaeologist at the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador, may have put it most clearly. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what could be found in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And he was not speaking metaphorically. Less than 10% of the Amazon basin has been surveyed by LiDAR. In Ecuador specifically, the Andean Chocó survey covered 2% of its total area. The Upano Valley scan covered 600 square kilometers out of a country with over 120,000 square kilometers of Amazonian territory. Every time scientists point a LiDAR sensor at a new patch of South American jungle, they find something. Every time. Not sometimes. Not occasionally. Every time. Rostain sees the Amazon not as pristine wilderness, but as something far more profound and far more unsettling. Rostain says we see the Amazon today as a pristine tropical forest, but in reality, it is an abandoned garden. An abandoned garden. Sit with that phrase for a moment. It means the Amazon as we know it, the vast green wilderness that environmentalists fight to preserve and that governments treat as an unlimited resource extraction zone, is not wild at all. It is the overgrown remains of landscapes that human beings tended for thousands of years. Civilizations that mainstream archaeology insisted could not exist, built road networks, managed soil fertility, engineered drainage systems, and organized populations the size of Roman-era London. And when those civilizations collapsed or were destroyed, the garden kept growing. The trees closed over the roads. The vines covered the platforms. The rivers eroded the canals. And within a few generations, nobody remembered any of it had ever been there. Ecuador alone has revealed at least 2 of these lost worlds in the space of 2 years. The Yumbo traders in the cloud forest, with their shaded road tunnels cut deep into the mountainsides and their stone pools reflecting the stars at the equator. The Upano city builders in the volcanic lowlands, with their 6,000 platforms and their dead-straight highways connecting 15 settlements across an area larger than 15 Manhattans. Both were found by the same laser technology. Both were ignored for decades by the institutions that should have been protecting them. Both are being destroyed right now by cattle farmers, road builders, and mining operations, while the scientific community argues about who deserves credit for finding what was always there. If 2% of one region produced over 200 hidden structures, and 600 square kilometers of another revealed over 6,000 platforms, the question is no longer whether there are more civilizations beneath the canopy. The question is, how many? And whether we will find them before the bulldozers do. If this story made you see the Amazon differently, click the video on your screen now. We covered the first discovery from the Upano Valley in detail, and what Rostain found there is just one piece of a much larger puzzle that is only beginning to come together.